and a warm welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Neelu Vyas. In what could end centuries-old religious practice at Kerala's Sabrimala temple, which banned the entry of women between the age 10 and 50, Supreme Court of India has observed that the right of a woman to pray is a constitutional right and does not depend on laws. While hearing a clutch of petitions, the top court has observed that there is no concept of a private temple in a public place, and therefore there could be no discrimination on the basis of gender and physiology. Justice Nariman even said that the age notification is arbitrary and conveniently leaves out the girl who is 9 years old or the woman who is 51 years. This observation certainly comes as a big boost to the feminist movement of the country. Joining me now is Geeta, Luthra, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court. Next to her is Rajyalaxmi. She's a sociologist at the Janki Devi Memorial College. Also joining us is Urvashi, Butalia, the renowned feminist and the publisher. I welcome all of you on this edition of Big Picture, and let me start today's discussion with Geeta, Luthra. Do you see the observation coming in from the Supreme Court as a momentous occasion as far as the feminist movement of the country is concerned?
Yes, it's obviously very positive. I don't think there was even a single judge on the 5-judge bench which did not make positive observations with regard to the entry of women. So I think it's a great sign. Question is it momentous? I think it's momentous. I think there is a lot of positive action for women which could be more momentous. But on the other hand, you can't then, say that this is not good, this is not a step in the right direction. Obviously, it's a step in the right direction. But I also think that as a woman, you want much more to be done for women than these observations, which to some extent, it's breaking down citadels which have been always barriers for women, but the women's movement has to have parameters of a greater social, cultural, economic equality than merely just this.
Right. Rajyalaxmi, coming to you on this, what is your take on what the Supreme Court has observed? Of course, it's a big boost to the women's movement. People are saying it's momentous, it's a remarkable occasion. But how do you really see this?
See, I do agree that it is a one step forward, and also feel that, the society should question certain social practices. It has been doing it and it needs to do it. But I underline the fact that social practices, somehow what I feel is that religious practices, that every religion has got certain myths, certain beliefs and certain practices which have been going on for a long time. They are part of the traditions. That is the way in which they would like to see their god or goddesses. So the religious institutions do propagate a particular kind of beliefs, practices which they believe that the common man should follow.
Right.
In the sense that, one often sees religious as a set of beliefs and practices where certain things are referred to as sacred, certain things as profane. So that kind of distinction between sacred and profane in terms of certain rites and practices have been following.
Right.
So when it comes to Sabrimala temple, where the practice is that you have to strictly follow certain practices for 40 days and then women are not allowed, one should not see this as a place where women are not allowed because they are, women, in the sense there is a gender discrimination.
So
it is just a religious practice which we will follow.
Okay, so you see it that the religious beliefs should not be very much tampered with. Also joining us on the program is Rahul, Easwar, the activist and also the grandson of the supreme priest of the Sabrimala temple. Rahul, welcome on The Big Picture. How do you see yesterday's Supreme Court's observation? Certainly a setback for you?
Yeah, I concede that it is a partial setback, but we will be presenting points. But three quick academic and legal points. One, let me say, boys early school and girls early school.
I think there is a network problem due to which the audio is not very audible. Rajyalaxmi, I'll come to you. That the very fact that the court has observed the right to pray for a woman is not dependent on legislation, and woman's right to pray is equal to that of a man. Now, this is the premise which the court has taken. And you've said
I
that
definitely agree with the fact that everybody, it's a constitutional right to practice whatever you feel right, or there should not be any discrimination between men and women, in the sense there should not be gender discrimination. But what I'm trying to say is that, you know, religious practices, certain myths are something, beliefs which are being passed on from generation to generation, just to remember a particular deity or a particular god in that way, in that form. So therefore, I would say that in the particular place, that point should be respected. This issue should not be seen as a gender discrimination, because it's a practice. Religious practices are certain practices.
now the basic premise of the entry into the Sabrimala temple is that a woman who is menstruating between the age of 10 years and 50 years cannot enter the temple. You quite agree with this premise?
No, see what I say
Because
is that
that's the basis of the discrimination.
No. See, the point is that what happens is that it's a temple which is really on the top of a hill. You need to climb many stairs. There is a possibility that maybe, you know, when the whole practice, because religion is a set of beliefs and practices which tries to teach people certain kind of a discipline, certain kind of observations, certain kinds of things to be practiced.
No, but why send out a message that even if the woman has to climb a hilltop, she can't do if she's menstruating?
No, I'm not saying that. You know, on the way, suppose in case there are certain inconveniences which are faced, maybe, I'm not saying that, you know, but see, what I'm trying to say is that religious practices, social practices can be questioned. But at times what happens is too much of interference, because it's a religious organization which needs to take care of it, not the court or the constitution.
Geeta,
as a state as
what's
a
your
whole.
take? I mean, do you agree with what Rajyalaxmi said?
I just can't agree with my learned friend. So one of the things she said was that there are certain myths. So first look at the myth. If there is a myth, the very fact there is a myth and that is scientifically incorrect, then somewhere we have to attack that. I mean, there was a myth that witch hunting was good. There is a myth that if you kill somebody, then, I mean, there are myths and myths among so many societies. You have to destroy what is unscientific or is not open to reason. So therefore, I think that can't be a logical reason why you can't be entering the temple. Now, the second aspect, that it may be difficult for women who are menstruating. Let's leave it to that woman's intelligence.
Absolutely.
If she wants to climb that many steps. Here are women who are menstruating and doing everything possible on this earth. Now, you can't be telling them, no, you can't climb 100 steps.
But Rajyalaxmi, court has very clearly said that you cannot discriminate on the basis of gender and physiology. So they have specified and underlined this line.
I completely do agree with that, but what I'm trying to say is that my whole point is that what happens is that, yes, there are certain traditions, there are certain practices which has to be left to the religious organization, religious institution, the way they want to look at it.
No, but why? Why do you want to leave those practices to the religious denominations who have ended up misusing things?
Because see, in a society, what happens is a society where there are a lot of cultural pluralism, there are a lot of diversities, there are certain practices, there are a lot of myths, there are a lot of stories. I'm not saying do not question. Yes, you need to question, you need to move forward. You also need to understand, rationalize about certain things. But then at the same time, there are certain things which, you know, should be region specific and should be accepted or maybe propagated and looked at that. So I'm not, completely, I'm not saying that it is not a step forward to it. Says there are certain social practices like Kanyadan, you know, which is absolutely questionable, which should not be accepted at all.
The premise on which you are emphasizing,
because the social
Geeta,
practices.
I'm wondering how many women in today's modern world will really agree with what Rajyalaxmi is saying as far as the religious beliefs and certain rituals are concerned. You've got to leave it to the religious organizations.
No, we can't. I don't agree with her, and I also wanted to comment on what Rahul said, because what Rahul said was treat it like a girls' college or a boys' college. So he says, look, this is not discrimination. It's really an institution, so there'll be a temple only for women, there'll be a temple only for men, and if that temple is only for men, then it's not as if we are trying to discriminate. So we have to look at that argument. I think that's an argument which we need to address, because obviously there will be institutions which will maybe only be for one gender or gender specific. Question is then that is this temple only gender specific and therefore not discriminatory? So obviously I think that's why the point that you made about what Justin Nariman said, a 51-year-old lady is not gender specific. A 9-year-old girl is not gender specific. So you're really saying women who are menstruating are impure or have a taboo that they can't enter. Now that can't be a logic. That's absolutely opposed to any reasonableness and any, I mean, that is on the face of it discriminatory. It can't be the logical reason why someone can't go to a temple. Temple is a public place and they can't discriminate on these grounds. True, there are temples which say, look, you have to be dressed in a full attire, then you can go. There will be other places where they'll say, look, we don't want someone to come in shorts. We want someone to come in maybe cotton,
in fact,
whatever.
I was about to come to this aspect which you've just pointed out. There are certain inherent strictures which the religious denomination passes. Like, this is against our structure, this is, I mean, you can't wear this, you can't do this, you can't do that. Now, we leave the entry of the woman or the man on a third party to decide whether he or she can enter the temple premise at all or not. Now, this is what exactly the court has said, that we will not allow the third party to, you know, comment on the entry of the woman. Can you just elaborate what the court really meant? Because there is a lot of confusion on this aspect.
So, I think first, I mean, carrying that argument a little further, say in certain temples or in other places of worship, you'll say somebody carrying leather or a leather belt may not be allowed to come in. Now, obviously, or should be in a attire which is not a dress but is a long dress, is fully covered. Now, those are religious sentiments. Question is, do they have a place under Article 14, do they not? According to me, that would be something which a temple or a place of worship, they can set those parameters as to how a person can enter, as long as it's within reasonable limits. But to say that a person can't enter because he belongs to a particular sex and a particular age within that sex is wholly discriminatory and cannot have any stance in reasonableness.
Right.
Now, addressing what you have said, that a third party won't be allowed, I think what the court meant was that if these are places of worship which are open to the public, then it is not as if the trustees can impose unreasonable conditions.
Absolutely.
It's really a question of having unreasonable conditions. If you have blue eyes, you can't come in.
Absolutely.
It's as good as saying.
Let me get in Rajyalaxmi on this. Now, this Article 26 of the Constitution, it does talk about the things which are allowed by the religious denominations. Don't you think that these religious structures or these religious organizations do put out unreasonable demands many a times, which again are discriminatory?
Of course, they do that. Many a times they do that. In fact, many practices which are really taking women backward needs to be questioned, like sati, maybe like the marriage practices where they say kanyadan, that is a man has to give a woman in dan, the very word dan that's seen as a commodity. That all needs to be questioned, because that is not something which one needs to accept it and can be accepted, because that's something which is a universal practices happen, not in a particular religion or a particular place. But as I said, I mean, I say the same thing. I'm not saying that, this whole thing about Sabrimala is as an institution, as a place which is there in Kerala, in Travancore districts, in that place. It's a very region specific. They have their own religious sentiments. So therefore, the way in which it has been practiced is something which can be allowed to
now,
do
for
it
example,
or cannot be.
at
That's
Sabrimala
the only thing,
only, we had heard stories of how there used to be female barbers inside the Sabrimala temple, but since they were during their menstrual cycle, they were not allowed to shave the heads of the people, so they were asked to leave, and there was there were job losses because of that. So those kind of practices, isn't this observation of the Supreme Court also going to address these inherent practices which were existing in earlier times?
Yes, some of these practices, yes, they need to address, and we need to look at it where there is a complete discrimination. But this particular entry, the way it has been happening and the way the logic of what the actual priests they believe in, it is something which we can, I feel cannot be questioned to that way that it becomes a larger debate or a larger issue of the society. It's a very regional specific. A region, maybe a religious institution can and should take care of it.
But you're talking about the larger society. Geeta, I would ask you to comment. Kerala society is supposed to be a literate society. Now, one feels surprised that why in a society like Kerala, you had people who were believing in these kind of orthodox practices and rituals, supposed to be a very literate society. Do you see some kind of a disconnect with this?
See, the fact is, you're not talking of this century, you're talking of a practice which has gone on from years and years. It's gone several centuries, and therefore what my learned friend's trying to say is, this is the sentiment. Now, what is sentiment? Somewhere you have to boil down sentiment, and it's being logical, and whether it's the sentiment of all the people. Obviously, those who have come to court, it's not their sentiment. It will also not be the sentiment of a lot of other people. It may be the sentiment of a very small minority that feels that maybe we shouldn't break with tradition. Maybe gods will get angry, but somewhere we have to get over that. We have to look beyond that. Otherwise, there is no bastion you will be able to break. The moment that you think that tradition, because it is tradition, is right, you will never be able to break a bastion. And that's, I think, what we need to address. That we can't be hiding behind the fact this is a sentiment.
Right.
If that sentiment was logical, if it wasn't saying women between 10 and 50, I could still see that somebody could have made an argument. But the moment that you say women between 10 and 50, that means menstruating women cannot enter, then I'm sorry, there can't be any logic. Because then it is just giving in to a myth of impurity or whatever of women, and discriminating on grounds which are not mere sex, but even worse than that. So we have to go beyond that.
Discriminatory practices, of course, are one thing which the court has largely highlighted, that it shouldn't be discriminatory, and if a man can enter a temple premises, so can a woman. But coming to the legal aspect of the whole thing, also the way Kerala government has reacted, at some point of time, it has agreed that it will allow the entry of women. Then a few years later, they upturned their own decision. Now, what is this shifting stand of the Kerala government which we have seen? And legally also, there is a state law which again is militating against what the Supreme Court is saying. So, can you just explain this dichotomy of the whole thing?
So, I think this is partly addressing sentiments of people, partly it is catering to what is traditional, and then on the other hand trying to be logical. So there is a dichotomy. Something like the judgment on scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, Supreme Court said that in every case you should have a right to go for bail, but on the facts the court may reject or grant bail. Now a lot of furor came up that why would you do that? So the court cannot just look at sentiment, because it's not the sentiment. You want to preserve the dignity of every person in society, be it man, woman, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe or whatever. The question is, but the court has to also ensure equality, it has to ensure fundamental rights, and therefore the court has to rise above and at the same time balance religious rights with. So that's the very delicate balance which a court has to place, because religious rights are also equally important and also part of fundamental rights. So in that balance, the court has to look at it. And as far as the state is concerned, the government is concerned, they have also to look at political compulsions of the people. And those political compulsions...
So you're saying that merely because of political compulsions, they have been maintaining a shifting
change
stance.
of stance.
Okay. Rahul Easwar now gets connected to us on the phone line. Earlier there was an audio problem when he was with us on Skype. Rahul, don't you see the Supreme Court observation of yesterday as something which is taking the religious practices of our country on a more progressive line?
Ma'am, 3 quick points. One, there are lakhs of female women already visiting Sabrimala. There is only an age regulation. There is a lady Sabrimala there. There are 30 lakh women offer Pongala and not even one man offers it. This is just like a male college and a female college. This is just like a boys' school and a girls' school. Sabrimala is there, Lady Sabrimala is there. Second, more academic point.
No, but Rahul, what I'm not able to understand, Rahul, your premise that treated as a boys' school or a girls' school is okay, but why discriminate the woman on her impurity about the menstruation, that just because she's menstruating, she will not be allowed the entry into the temple?
Thank you for the question, ma'am. It's an absolute lie. Let me say with responsibility for every word. It is an absolute lie that periods or menstruation is the issue. 1991 Kerala High Court verdict categorically points out that is not the issue. The issue is the deity concept. Let me say with responsibility for every word again, there is no God inside any temple. What is inside a temple is called a deity. There is a huge difference between the idea of God and the idea of deity. Deity is a specific energy center, which is a socio-cultural energy center, spiritual energy center in a place. God is universal, but deity is a very specific thing.
No, but Rahul, if I can interrupt, what I want to ask you is that in today's modern world, how do you really convince the people of this difference between the God and the deity, which you're trying to explain me? I mean, one would see this as a universal point that the woman is the woman's entry is banned inside a temple just because she's menstruating. Now, how do we explain this logic?
Thank you for that question again, because that's a misunderstanding we are trying to find. We are pointing out there is a lady Sabrimala where males also have similar regulations. And we will be pointing out that temples are not public places. Temples are devotees' places. Temples are devotee spaces. I consider that there is a fight between Article 25 and Article 14. This is an epic fight. We will present our position.
No, but Supreme Court has also said, Rahul, Supreme Court has also said that the third party cannot be allowed to ban the entry of a woman inside the temple. Now, don't you agree with what Supreme Court has said?
Man, last year 4.2 lakh women visited Sabrimala. I go to Sabrimala with my mother and grandmother, who is the wife of the senior Supreme Priest of Sabrimala. Lakhs of women already visited. Only young women have an age regulation. Just like there is age regulation in army, just like an age regulation for different occasions are there. This is only an age regulation.
That is what the Supreme Court Justice Nariman has said, that this age limit which you have said between 10 years and 50 years, it's totally arbitrary.
That's the reason why we are trying to point out we are protected under Article 25. We are protected under Article 25 and we are pointing out just one important thing too is there. DT is a legal entity. DT is a living entity. DT is a person who has rights. Supreme Court is constitutionally bound and legally bound to protect the interests of the DT too. So we are pointing out the importance of the deity worship, which is unique to India and our Hindu system. So we are pointing out that deity's interest should be protected.
Okay,
even
so you are saying, got your point, Rahul, fair enough. You are saying that the deity's interest has to be protected. Now, Geeta, many people would say that why Supreme Court or why the courts are getting into this domain of religion and faith, as what Rajyalaxmi also pointed out initially. How much would you really agree with Rahul Easwar at this point of time?
So, of course, the Supreme Court has to have a very delicate balance, because ultimately religious rights are sacrosanct.
Okay.
At the same time, right to equality is also sacrosanct. So you have to balance the two. Now, where religious rights are impinging on the right to equality and are discriminating against a woman and
that's
are
where the courts
arbitrary,
intervene.
that's where the courts will step in.
Okay.
Now, what he is trying to say is that a deity is has a right in law, which he is right, but who is pronouncing what that right of the deity should be?
Absolutely. Okay, so it's been an enlightening discussion, though the hearing in the case is still on, but the way the case is progressing so far looks like it could lead to a change in the dogmas and the orthodox practices, and this case will certainly redefine the religion on a progressive path, apparently breaking the patriarchal structures of the society. I thank all my guests, Geeta, Luthra, Rajyalaxmi, and I also thank Rahul, Easwar on the program. It was a pleasure having all of you on the program. Goodbye and thanks for watching.